Hi and good afternoon, and welcome to the latest edition of Lunchtime Learnings. Get my teeth in today on a Friday. Delighted to be joined by my next guest, great guest, Heenay Joshi, who is based in Coventry, Warwick, Leamington Spa, the Midlands, trying to take over the whole of the UK to have the best agency. No, he's not. But going to discuss Heenay's journey from going from an agent to a principal today. So, Heenay, thanks very much for joining me.
Yeah,
Incredibly
pleasure.
grateful for your time. So,
Yeah,
so thank you. We were having a right laugh about one of my guests offline, who we were talking about, who I managed to think wasn't alive, but he did a magical appearance on Monday and came back from the dead. So Peter Tobin, you were exceptional. So thank you. Hi Andy Overman, thanks for joining us. So please like it, share it, give Hene loads of love. Look at that lovely smile on his face. And hi Mincy, thank you. Nice to see you. So Hene, thanks very much for being a guest today. Really
yeah, no.
grateful. Thank you for your time. So how'd you get into agency in the first place? What's your story?
Well, I sort of fell into it, if I'm honest. The I'd gone through. I was playing professional cricket and coaching at the time, and I was at uni, and I'd gone through really bad sort of depression at that time, and there was a couple of things that happened which sort of got me out of it. Um, and I had a choice. I was either going to become a sort of professional full-time coach, but then I saw an advert in the local newspaper or something like that, I think it was, for a trainee estate agent, and that was with Halifax Estate Agents. So yeah, my journey started from there. Really, my family were sort of into property in the background of that anyway, but yeah, properly it started with Halifax Estate Agents.
Okay. Well, I'm interested in being a professional cricketer, seeing as that's my favourite sport. That's a proper sport, rather than football. Hey, Andy Overman. Um, what did you take away? I mean, bringing your professional skills into agency. What
Yeah,
did you
so
bring your
I think in
professional?
terms of the background, I think I was, I was trying to, like I was when we spoke about this last week, trying to sort of gather my thoughts really. I think that there were sort of four main influences that's influenced, throughout my, agency sort of career really. And that was firstly family, and, we're just a humble family. We're Hindus, but I'd say that we were more spiritual rather than religious. Um, and there's lots of lessons really in my upbringing that I sort of have applied to agency. The second thing was cricket in itself, and anyone who's played or has been around, a pretty high level team sport, whether it's cricket or football or rugby, will have lots of um, um, experiences or stories or lessons that they could have taken from that into a state agency, especially how I started with the state agency, which was it was about the team and the branch. I know it's moving more towards the individual now, but there was a lot of lessons in that. How you're first taught, and then you're coached, and then eventually you're mentored. Um, and how I know there's a lot of talk about being leaders and leadership, but really being that role model within that team environment. So there's loads of lessons, whether you play cricket, football, or rugby, or any team sport that you can take. um, the other was music, actually, interestingly enough. And when I was, one of the books that I'd read by Malcolm Gladwell, in the 10,000 hours that you spend, I learned a lot about myself, to know that, look, if I want to be good at anything, I need to be able to spend that 10,000 hours learning and developing. But I learned about myself that I needed to really be passionate about what I do. I wasn't one of those hard grafters that I would just sort of plow through it even if I wasn't enjoying it, which I'd previously put down to me being lazy, but it wasn't that. And then the fourth thing was studying really in university. I was actually got accepted to Coventry University's automotive design, which was at the time, I think it still is, like a world class course. And at the time, and I still think it's the same, but all the top designers of all the major manufacturers have been either to Coventry University to study there, and then they go on to the Royal College of Art and their masters in design course. So I learning and growing up around Edward de Bono and lateral thinking, and that's been really interesting and useful in agency. And as we've had difficult times, just thinking out the box and trying to find solutions really. So I think that those are the four main influences that's affected my agency life really.
Okay, thank you. So what made you decide to go from an agent to actually running your own business?
It was, well, this is my second estate agency business actually. So when I'd first, so do you want to know about like the first time or this time around?
Well, it'd be interesting because there's going to be people here wondering, well, hold on a second. You've been an agent, you've then opened an agency.
Yes.
Potentially you went back into being an agent, then you've opened again. So what made you go from an agent to a principal, and then what made you actually
hopping around? So the career was absolutely.
What did you learn? What did you learn the first time round that you brought into the second time round?
So it's a lesson that I've only just learned 6 months ago about myself. Actually, throughout my whole journey, I've just figured it out 6 months ago, and ever since then, we've been doing these seller boxes, and I know you want to know a little bit more about that. But what was happening is that when I joined Halifax Estate Agents, from the very start, within a couple of years, Halifax Estate Agents started to franchise off their branches. There was quite a lot of lessons to be learned in that. There's interesting stories in that as well. But the way in which I was sort of brought up was that though I started at the Leamington office, I would spend quite a lot of time in their Warwick, Kenilworth, their Shipston on Stour, Solihull, all of that sort of area, just to get good depth and breadth of knowledge really. And their training was absolutely outstanding, and I still use a lot of it now with Adam Walker's needs-based selling, getting people's hot buttons, having different types of closes. So when they and I can't remember the precise ins and outs, but I won some sort of national award when I was a valuer stage for listing conversions and fees. So when they were franchising off their branches, so it was Halifax Bank of Scotland and Bank of Scotland, so HBOS Group. The regional managers really wanted to get back into the Lloyds banking group, but as a plan B, they were thinking, okay, let's just buy these branches really. So I was approached by a couple of regional managers to go in partnership, and I chose to go with Dale, who had been my area manager before. I really liked him. He's a really good guy, very sort of tough, but really knew his stuff. So that's so I owned an estate agency, I was partnering in 4 estate agencies even before I'd become a manager. And a lot of the managers who I was working for pretty much overnight started to work for me. So that was interesting in itself, really. And I mean, I could go on and on in terms of how Halifax then changed.
Because that's interesting. There's some people that I know are watching that have most probably gone from having to Sam Hunter behave yourself. So Sam says, go Heenay, and I think he wants some wine as well. That's Sam Hunter. Some booze. Sam, thanks for joining us. Hope the baby and your good lady is very well. But there's some people actually that are thrown in a position where they have gone from being a manager, being a negotiator, to being somebody's manager.
Yeah.
How do you earn that respect? You know, how hard it is, and what did you do to win them over?
I think probably the short answer to that is the wrong way. I mean, having Dale there as you know, really the partner, but he was like the guy that everyone sort of respected. He was one of the most intimidating people that I've ever met in my life. And when we transferred over from Halifax to our own business, some of the managers left because they knew that you know, Dale wasn't going to give them an easy ride, really. So it was just one of them that they, frankly, that they had to get on with it. And you know, my role within that partnership was that out of the 4 branches, I started off at Leamington because that was you know, the business was really on its knees. There was a year in between assigning the agreement to say, yes, we would take these franchises, to actually completing. So in that whole year, Halifax just weren't spending any money at all on any marketing, any business generation. Not that they did a lot anyway, because they traded off their brand. So I was so focused on sort of turning around the Leamington branch. And to be fair, you know, those managers that we had in Kenilworth and Warwick and Hall Green and Solihull, they were okay at the time. And Dale would spend his time, you know, whipping those branches into shape, really. So, you know, it wasn't as if they were working for me directly. But there were occasions, I remember specifically, you know, we went on a training course somewhere, and we had a particular manager who didn't quite like that he worked for me, really. And he was sort of playing up a bit. So you just have to sort of, well, just talk to him straight, really. You just don't overthink it. You've got to deal with it, and that's the way that it is, really.
Okay, so how did you turn that office round then? In that first year, what did you do to bring the business in?
Well, you know, turning around, anyone who's tried to turn around a business which has got a bad reputation is a lot more difficult than trying to cold start a business from new. And Leamington is a sort of place where, you know, word of mouth really does get around really sort of quickly. But it was it's difficult for me to answer. And you know, when I've been going to interviews, you know, before we set up this company, or whenever I've been interviewed, it's really difficult to answer that question, because one of the things that I learned, again, from that sort of sporting background, is that I'm a player, and you've got to ask a coach how to get the best out of a player. You don't ask the player why they're that, you know, why they've been successful, because they'll just say, well, I just do what I do. So it's difficult for me to sort of say, but the Adam Walker training, needs-based selling, understanding hot buttons, the basics of training, having empathy, not trying to oversell, all of those things together. And then obviously one conversation is going to be very different to another, depending on their circumstances and their personality type as well. But it's always about just bringing up your stock levels, you know, maximizing your fee as much as you can, making sure that you're selling at a high conversion rate, and acting in a way and selling them in a way that those sellers will give you a testimonial. And interestingly enough, I think one of the trainers that I was learning from when I was doing my own sort of self-development, really, was Dr. Tony Alessandra, and he was on one of the webinars recently, and he talks about creating raving fans, and you know, that those sellers who you know, are giving you testimonials. You know, it's okay to say yes, they would recommend you, but do they recommend you? So just, you know, asking, you know, who they know, who are selling, and getting them to actually drum up some business for you. That always helps.
You know what? That's a really interesting point. I was just out buying Mrs. Brown some oranges this morning, and I had a call and I was speaking to this lady, and she asked me what I did. So I had this whole conversation about what I was doing, and you know that I'm bringing this Australian guy over in January for 5 hours sessions, and she just said to her, "I hate estate agents. My husband hates estate agents." So I said, okay, that's great. So this is going to start, and had a conversation with her. She never heard from her estate agent for 8.5 years since she bought the property, which is scary. And whatever I said to her, I wasn't going to win at all.
Yeah.
Perception. And then I started talking about trust and likability and whatever. And she said, yeah, I understand all of that. So then I said to her, look, presumably you got friends, and she said yes. So I said, well, do you think your friends are curious to know what's going on in the property market? Do you know any of your friends that may be thinking of selling in 2021? And do you know any of your friends that failed to sell in the last 2 years? And she said yes, on all accounts. So I said, well, look, would you feel comfortable giving me their name and number? And then we obviously called them first, and she said yes.
Yeah.
And you're right, you know, so I got the names of 3 people who were thinking of selling or have failed to sell just by asking a question, and it cost me absolutely nothing.
Yeah, I think, you know, I was racking my brain because for all you guys who are watching, Stephen really helped me out a lot when I first set up by sending me a few documents with the Australian model. So I've been sort of trying to rack my brain in terms of giving Stephen, your viewers, some sort of tips really, and what we've been doing. So one of the things that I haven't done, so it's one of them do as I say, not as I do type of scenarios, but I've sort of half done it. So when we get a video testimonial from a seller, obviously we're posting it on our social media and we're tagging them, the owners, in, as long as they agree to it, so all their friends get to see it. But it's easier more now than ever to send over that video to the sellers via WeTransfer, whatever else. Just give them like a personalized discount code, you know, their surname with the first line of address or something, so that they can post it on their social media to say, look, if you're, you know, thinking about selling, just use this code, you know, call Heenay, use this code, and he'll look after you, type of thing. And you can, and you know, a lot of people now on these community groups on Facebook and whatever else, you know, you only need 2 or 3 people to start posting things like that in those community groups. So it's easier now more than ever to get amongst the community. Unfortunately, our business model is different, that we're not looking to take on properties in a specific area, so I don't do that. But it's a really easy win, really, and how you can really leverage your business quite quickly, and doing it the right way.
Brilliant. Well, look, I think you are so incredibly humble with what you say. And I'm just really interested because, you know, you said that you had the best listing, the best conversion and best fees. So what were you doing in your process at the Halifax, wherever you were, to get the best conversion rates and the best fees?
So we've talked about, me and you have talked about, you know, setting up a training and development program when I've set up, or when I was setting up a sales department for another company. So, you know, the simple answer to that is that everything that you have sort of teaching your viewers really is they just really need to adhere to that. So, you know, at the valuation, understanding motivation, ability, needs, timescales, getting their hot buttons, you know, what are the 3 things that you're looking for from your estate agent, apart from getting you the most amount of money possible in the shortest amount of time. Making sure that you do a pre-call to verify, and that's you can use qualifying statements, and that's your pre-call is the start of your close, where you're saying, look, I'm bringing everything with me, you know, if you're happy with everything, do you want me to bring my camera along, or, you know, whatever excuse, just to get them to say yes, they are happy if to sign up if they're happy, and then you just end up saying, well, just do me a favor and just have your IDs with you, because I'll need that to get things started. And once they're in that frame of mind, even before you've stepped foot through that door, they're already sort of thinking, well, the guy's going to come along, he's going to give us the valuation, and we're going to sign up with him. So then at the valuation, you're doing your intro sort of meeting before you have your tour around, and you're again qualifying statement. Look, we're going to go through the price. If you're not happy with anything, we can go through it. And if you are happy, are you still happy for me to go ahead? And they'll say, yeah. And, you just say, well, have you got IDs ready? And they'll say, yeah. So once they're in that frame of mind, it's pretty simple after that. And then once you've got that out of the way, you don't have to worry too much about, selling. You're still going to close using, a Phoebe method, or, whether you use the golden circle or whatever technique that you're going to use. But, getting those sellers in the right frame of mind. And I think, estate agents generally is just about managing relationships. So whether you're talking to a seller or a landlord, buyer or tenant, it's all about managing that relationship. So yeah, when you sort of break it down like that, it can become quite simple, really.
Okay, brilliant. Somebody's just asked, what's the golden technique?
So the golden circle is by Simon Sinek. So if you have a look on YouTube and just type in golden circle, it's about an 18-minute long video, and it talks about how the human brain works when they're making a decision, and people buy into more about your why you do what you do, and then sort of how you do it, and then what you're going to do to deliver that. So for instance, if you're using it on a presentation or on your sort of about us on your website or anything like that, you'd say, I believe in, well, we say I believe in working with pride, integrity and dedication. The way in which we do this is that we do XYZ when we do we're a personal estate agent, and we can offer you bespoke marketing or whatever else you might be doing. And then how we do this is that we meet face to face, understand exactly what you're looking for, and provide you with market leading solutions. So that's the simplified way of the golden circle. But actually in that video, and I forget, Stephen, you'll know better than I do, there's a graph in that Simon Sinek talks about. Can you remember what that graph is called?
No.
So it's a way to penetrate the market. So what was happening as estate agents before and across all industries, Simon Sinek find out, was that once people thought that if they got sort of 10% of their market share, they were an established company, they were really, really happy. And when eBay and Amazon and all these likes came along and they started to get 60-70% of market share, people thought, well, hang on a second, we're just scraping the surface here. So what Simon Sinek talks about is that if you were to take any of your audience, 100% of your audience, the main people who would take up your services are 66%, and they are the early majority and the late majority. But to get to that 66%, you have to go through the early adopters. So I won't sort of repeat what Simon Sinek says, but really what you've got to do is if you're a new estate agency, or you're trying to turn around a branch, don't be scared to say, look, I'm new, I'm different, this is what we're going to be doing. Would you be interested in taking up our services, knowing that majority of people will turn you down because they trust established brands. But you have to go through that bit of heartache until you get around 20% of market share. And once you get market share, then you become the norm, and that's how you enter into the main market, and you can take big market share. And I understand that was similar to what Purple Bricks tried to do when they tried to enter estate agency, which is to start off being new and very different until they got to a certain percentage of market share where they started to become the norm, and then they would start penetrating into the to the main markets, really. So yeah, it's a really good video by Simon Sinek.
Okay, well, I've just posted in the comments his TED talk talking about that as well. It's about 18 minutes.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's.
Okay, so we will all have a look and learn from it. You talked about seller boxes. as well?
Yeah. So one of the things which I came to the realization about, which and it was only about 6 months ago, is that what I do must be a reflection of who I am. And what was happening was when I was working for other companies and I couldn't quite understand it, I would get this gut feeling to say something wasn't quite right. And actually, looking back, what was happening is that my beliefs were contradictory to the role that I was undertaking. And when I first set up, even this company, which will be coming up to about 2 years in January, I had to make a decision as was I going to be a company who was going to take on self-employed agents, in which case I needed to make some decisions about how we operated and how we assisted those agents, or was I going to be a personal agent, similar to Stephen, what you that document that you gave me with that Australian model. And I think that, see, if for me, if I was looking for a role again, it's not about employed versus self-employed. It's really like three choices of really companies and where those leads come from. So I could either be employed or self-employed with a brand who had a really strong brand. So whether that was Savills or Purple Bricks, where the brand was the reason why most of the leads came in which case, I could pretty much do a similar role to what I was doing back with Halifax as a valuer. I'm just going out to see, 10, 15 valuations every week, and it's my job to convert them. I don't have as much control over my overall earnings, but if I chose the right company, then I could have job security. Or then you've got like the second type of business where it's sort of 50-50. So I know around the Midlands, Andrew Grant has started to do a similar thing, and Hart, I think, has started to do a similar thing, where, yes, those leads will come because of that brand, but also the agents are encouraged to do their own social media, be market, understand their local market. So the leads come sort of 50-50, really. Or are you like a powered by model, or even a license or a franchise where the costs are really low, but it's really down to the individual agent to go out and to get that business, in which case you would earn more of your fees, but you've just got to make sure that you understand your cost per acquisition and keep a handle of your fixed costs, really. So I was sort of in the middle of thinking, well, what sort of company are we going to be? And I had this thing where about a year or so, just by chance, I agreed to take on a couple of self-employed agents. And it worked out in some ways, and it didn't quite work out in other ways. And when I came to this realization that actually what I do has to be a reflection of who I am, I just thought, no, do you know what, just bin this. I'm just going to be a personal agent. And in that, I had to make a few decisions, and I suppose a few rules that I had to become comfortable about. And one of those things was that going back to my car design days was one of the lessons that we'd learnt when I was doing some work experience with Jaguar at the time, actually. And they said that BMW had spent more on the design of their key than Jaguar had spent on the whole of their design for the next 5 years. And this was because the German manufacturers knew that what attaches the person with the brand is tactile. It's the key, it's the steering wheel, it's everything that you feel and touch. And I suppose the difficulty that I've had, and anyone has really when we're setting up with their own brand from scratch, is that they don't know who you are, really. So by having these sellers boxes, they're feeling quality, they're opening it up, they're reading some quality material, they've got a USB stick in there where if they put it in, they've got a video of other testimonials. And we had to decide what does that brand actually mean. And what I wanted for that brand to mean is that people have reassurance. So if in fashion, for example, you wouldn't go into I don't know, Louis Vuitton or something and ask whether are their bags fashionable, or you wouldn't ask Nike if your feet would hurt if you wore their shoes for running. It's a given. So those seller boxes and the brand, really what I want to do is make sure that it's reassuring to people. And it seems to have worked, actually. We though we've had a couple of lockdowns, the seller's box was only really meant for me to give to someone on valuation. But I thought, well, let me try doing a bit of business generation with it. And just before lockdown, I spent a day door knocking 9 houses, because the types of property targeting, it's a wide area. And as much as what I try and work out from the pictures which are empty and which ones are vacant, out of the 9, 4 were still vacant. And then out of the 5, one of them had sold, 2 of them listed with me within 2 weeks, and 2 of them asked me to go back 2 weeks later. One of them subsequently sold with their current agent, but I've got 1 more to go back to. So the fee income from that will be around 15 to 20 grand. And the cost of box is about £8.50 or something like that. So yeah, return on investment is, I've got some goals in 2021. And now that I've decided that this is the type of business that I want, return on investment is going to be a big thing for us.
Okay, so what made you decide to go down that seller box route?
When I was working with Sean with Fine and Country, the sales guys were using their Refined magazine as a way to start a conversation, and I always thought that was a really good idea. So I suppose the challenge for me was that, if I'm up against these big brands, like, one of them came on the market from Savills, actually. So if I'm up against these big brands of Savills and whatever else, then what reassurance do I need to give that they would instruct, just me, rather than this big brand? So I just thought, let's just give it a go with a bit of quality. And it just made sense. I mean, I've been doing content marketing for obviously a little while, so we've got stuff which I could adapt and use. And I've got a graphic designer anyway, so I just thought, let's just give it a go and try it. And it was just one of those things for, every 100 things that we try, sometimes 1 or 2 of them come off, and that was just one of those things that came off for us, really.
Okay, so when you decided to set up again,
Yeah.
How did you decide what market that you wanted to get in, and what research did you do? Because there's people watching this that are either just
so that was the problem, really. First of all, I didn't want to get back to set up my own estate agency. I just became unemployable. If I was to tell you the companies that I'd sort of been with, and even up until sort of Sean and Fine and Country, which I really, really enjoyed. I really, really enjoyed working there. But I sort of just felt with Newman's and Fine and Country, I'd just outgrown the role, really. And the problem that I'd had is that because I enjoyed doing both sales and lettings, and because I'd been grown up, or, the business that we had, we didn't have lots of money. So I was always trying to find an angle or an entrepreneurial route to which to grow the business. It was really hard for me to get an employed role, because sort of a lettings manager or just the sales manager was frankly boring. And when you start getting into area manager and the regional manager positions that I'd sort of started to get into, it takes you a little bit away from what I'd really sort of enjoyed, really. Interestingly enough, I'd read I listened to, I should say, a book by the 4-star American General Colin Powell, if you remember. He had a short stint, and in the audio book, he's and I'm paraphrasing, but it was along the lines to say, look, it's okay to know whether you were built to be a general or you were built to be presidential. And it was just something that really stuck in my mind. I wasn't quite sure at the time how that would fit into agency, but it was one of them that, I'm a boots on the ground type of person. I'm not yeah, that sort of coach that I was talking to you before about, you know, doing what I need to do through other people. I don't have the patience. I'm just not built that way, really. Which probably answers the early question that you had was, you know, how did I get those managers to come away around to my type of thinking, really? And the answer to that is, it's not really a conversation. I was their boss, whether they like it or not, and they need to get a profit. I'm happy to, you know, for them to run the branch and go with their ideas, but I wasn't going to resign my directorship just because they didn't like it. So you have to get on with it.
Okay, so starting a new business, challenging. Okay, where would you go to find your vendors, find your landlords? What have you done? What have you done? How have you got your name out there?
Well, I've just realised I didn't answer your other question properly, really. So, you know, when for your viewers, if you're looking to set up an estate agency and you're doing this sensible thing, which is to pick an area that you want to operate in, you know, if you're looking at sales, you know, your best way of generating that business is to use content marketing, which I'm happy to talk about, and using Facebook. Either and there are 4 levels of content marketing which you need to have, which I've learned the hard way. But yeah, once you've got that content marketing and those 4 different levels of content marketing, as long as you're finding them and putting them through, and then you're siphoning them down, you're going to generate sales leads. And for landlords, you know, getting landlord leads is really easy, with downloadable guides and really just doing a seminar or even a webinar these days. You know, I did one for the council recently, and well, we're doing a series of these webinars and seminars, and you know, within a couple of years we've got, I think, 2,000 or 3,000 landlords details, really. So you can.
And how did you go and approach a council then? Did you just have a conversation? Simple as that?
Well, it wasn't. See, it's. I just got a call out the blue to say, look, we you know, we've heard of you. You seem to know what you're talking about. Will you go and meet, you know, the Coventry and Warwickshire Local Enterprise Partnership, because they're looking for a board member. And I didn't know who they were. I said, yeah, that's fine. I'll go. And I knew them from a cricket club, so I said, yeah, I'd go and meet them. I knew the introducer, sorry, from the cricket club. And they're asking me all these questions, you know, about, you know, being on the board. And I turned around to them and said, look, I'm really not the right person for this job or this role that you want. And they said, yeah, you're right, you're not, but we need help on the housing and planning board. Would you mind helping out, you know, and with them? I said, yeah, it's fine. However I can help, I'm happy to. And then being on the housing and planning board, you know, you're sort of around around here, all the sort of councillors, and then the CEO of the LEP asked me to go and meet him and introduce me to the Coventry Council sort of property team. And they said, look, these guys, we want to engage more with landlords. You know, how do we do it? And I said, look, this is what I do to do it. If you want, I can do it for you guys as well. And they said, yeah, that's fine. And that was it, really. So it was just a case of, whatever I needed to from them to get them, you know, landlords to their seminars, they were happy for me to do. So we started to do these webinars a couple of years ago. And it's sort of become the norm, really, and people start to expect the webinars. I should do more of them, because, you know, that I only want a really small business. You know, the difficulty is how much time do I spend, you know, for the council and getting thousands of leads, which really I'm not really interested in converting them into business for myself, really. So it's a bit of a balancing act.
Fair enough. So I've just got another question come in. You mentioned 4 levels of content. Marketing.
Yes.
Are you happy to share what those 4 levels
are? Yeah, I've written it down, actually. So the first type, and Luke Sinclair and Ian in Cheshire, they do some really good content, Michelle, and it's some of the stuff which Chris Watkin talks about in terms of the community stuff. So if you use Gary Vaynerchuk's, give 4 times and take a 5th time as a template. So if you went out and did a whole load of community stuff, what's going on in the local community, and you sort of gave 4 times, and at the end the call to action is, if you want to know what's happening to property prices in this area, click the link. So that's your first level of content, community stuff, non property related. And then for those people then click in to want to know more about, what's going on. So your second level is then, area guides and, market update videos. And then the call to action to that is to say, if you're thinking about selling or renting or buying or renting or letting your home in this area, then click here. So that will then take them to the third level of content, and that's where it gets a little bit complicated, because then you've got specific stuff for sellers, landlords, buyers, and tenants, and then you give in like relevant tips, and that might be how to achieve the best price possible for sellers, or how to stage your home for viewings, or I did a change of address checklist. So you can do that, and then at that point the call to action needs to really be call us to register your details, if you're thinking about buying or selling or whatever. And then once they're into your actual database or your CRM, whatever it is, then the fourth level of and the final bit at the bottom is where you're giving them testimonials of other clients that you've helped out for specific topics. What should you do if you're having a price reduction? So those quite specific things. So at the moment it seems if you need to have sort of 4 levels of content to one, capture enough people at the top end, but also make sure you're siphoning them down, that you're not just email shotting thousands of people every week and you're not getting any tangible business from it.
Fantastic, thank you. I'm very conscious of time, so thank you for giving it up. Just one couple final questions, if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
Talked a lot about self-development and training, and you mentioned with Malcolm Gladwell, you mentioned Simon Sinek.
Yeah.
Who else have you come across, books wise, podcasts, learnings that can help people who are watching or listening to this, please?
So one of the really good, I'm trying to find it on my phone now, so I have to do it as audio books because I can't. I'm not a good reader. So let me, let me look in the library. Sorry. Sorry, so it might be under the personal stuff, or it might be under the work stuff. But what do you want your customers to become is a really good book for entrepreneurs. It helps you to think outside the box. Who do you want your customers to become?
Who's that by, please?
That's by Michael Schrage, SCHRAGE. And what he did was it was a book when he was at Harvard Business School, and they just studied what the big corporate companies and why they were so successful. And what he found was there was a specific trend where it wasn't about how the company sold to that person. It was more about the company helping that person to become what they wanted to sort of become, really. So he uses Disney in there, in that they didn't try and sell their costumes. They just saw that loads of girls who went to Disney World were enchanted by these princesses, and they wanted to become princesses themselves. So Disney just helped them to become princesses. And there's sort of really good stuff, out the box thinking, not really estate agency type stuff, but I think it appealed more to the sort of lateral thinker in me than the estate agency side of me. Any of the stuff by Dr. Tony Alessandra is golden. I nearly swore then. I was quite proud of myself, Stephen, that I've not sworn throughout this whole webinar. So any of the Tony Alessandra stuff, and that really helped with selling.
His name?
Sorry,
Dr. Tony.
Dr. Tony Alessandra.
Okay.
And then loads of his stuff. And who was the other one? And then, to be honest, there's so red. Can't remember now.
Okay. Worry, but thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, there was a few. I'm on one at the moment. I can't even remember what it is now. But yeah, there's quite a few stuff. Yeah, and it's not always salesy or estate agency sort of related. I quite enjoy. Actually, there was one on leadership, and it was by someone who'd worked in the army, and it was called. Fuck. I can't. I'll put it in the comments. I'll dig the book out and I'll put it in the comments. And what the special forces sort of worked on in terms of their skill sets, and that was really useful when I was thinking, when I had my other business, and if we were going to take on agents in terms of their coaching and development, was that they need to have they use the acronym like LOCKED or ROCKED. So the L or the R stands for leadership or role model, O for organization, C for communication, K for knowledge, E for experience, and D for discipline. And it was a really interesting book. And what we found, what I felt, was that actually become a really good estate agent, you needed to have all of those attributes as well. And probably discipline is the most important one out of all of those.
Brilliant. Well, look, if you could share that would be amazing in the comments. Heenay, I'm really grateful for your time. Thank you. You shared loads and loads of great content, great quality. You're a very humble gentleman, and it's been inspiring to watch your journey and see your successes and how well you've done in the last couple of years. And I look forward to seeing you to continue to grow and your further successes. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you again for watching, whether you're watching now, whether you're listening on replay or on the podcast. Thank you very much. Please like it, please share it, please tag your colleagues in. If you are listening to it as a podcast, please would you be kind enough to rate and review it. Next week, I'm going to be joined by James Williams, who's an Australian real estate coach, who's going to talk a lot about practice. I'm joined by David Knox, who's an exceptional American coach that we saw out of the NAR conference a couple of years ago. I have got David Thomas of Liberty Gate and Angela Barbara Robbins of Robinson Estates in Nottingham. We're going to be talking about collaboration. And on January the 5th, I've got some gentleman called Josh Fegan coming on early morning to share loads of good content. And Josh is one of the best Australian and the world real estate coaches. So looking forward to that. Thanks again. Have a great weekend, or whenever you're watching it, have a really good day. Heenay, thank you so much for being a great guest, and good afternoon all.